Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to show you something about the Lynette Hooker case that has never been seen before, and quite frankly, it changes everything we thought we knew about her final moments. The electronics on this boat are a forensic tracker on steroids. It is a computer on the water that records every move, every heartbeat of the vessel. If Brian Hooker is lying about what happened that night in the Bahamas, this boat already knows the truth and the data is about to scream. We've been following this for over a month now. For those of you just joining this nightmare, Lynette Hooker vanished into the pitch-black waters of the Abaco Islands. Her husband, Brian, claims she simply bounced off the back of their dinghy while they were heading back to their luxury yacht, Soulmate, after a night of drinks. He says he searched for her, got lost, and was eventually marooned while his wife was swallowed by the sea. But a boat doesn't just hold secrets, it keeps receipts. This isn't just a missing persons case anymore. It's a digital autopsy of a crime scene. I have spent weeks digging into the guts of the Soulmate, and what I've found makes Brian's story feel like a cheap piece of fiction. Most people look at a yacht and see a vacation. I look at it and see a witness. This specific boat, a 46-foot Morgan sailing sloop, isn't your average weekend cruiser. It is built like a battleship with hulls 3 inches thick. You don't just bounce off things here. But more importantly, the technology on board this specific vessel is so sophisticated, it's almost unheard of in the sailing world. Think about this. Why would a man who claims he had power issues choose a boat that is literally self-sustaining? We've confirmed the Soulmate is equipped with high-end solar arrays and a battery bank so powerful it doesn't even need to plug into a dock. Yet Brian's defense hinges on the idea that the boat went dark. The satellites went offline for 11 hours. 11 hours of silence while his wife disappeared. In a world where this boat is constantly talking to the sky, that isn't a glitch. That's a manual override. When you look at the forensic trail, the ghost ship theory starts to fall apart. This boat has a FLIR system, thermal night vision. It can see in total darkness. If Brian was approaching that boat alone, or if there was a struggle on the deck, the sensors would have registered the heat, the movement, and the location. He told investigators it was a power event. But the experts who know this boat's history say that's impossible. The solar power was second to none. You don't lose satellite connectivity for half a day because of a cloud. You lose it because someone pulled the plug. I want you to feel the weight of that. Imagine being in the middle of the ocean, the water like glass, and the one thing that is supposed to keep you safe, the digital brain of your home, is intentionally silenced. Every inch of this boat was designed for transparency, yet it was treated like a tomb. And then there's the dinghy. Brian wants us to believe Lynette fell off a bouncy boat. But I've tracked down the original specs of the dinghy that came with the Soulmate. It's a Boss hard hull. It doesn't bounce. It doesn't flex. It's a rigid, heavy piece of equipment. If you hit that water, you aren't bouncing, you're sinking. It makes you wonder, if he's lying about the physics of the boat, what else is he lying about? We are just scratching the surface of the guts of this vessel. There is a hidden entrance to the master cabin that Brian was seen tampering with the morning after she vanished. The rescuers saw him. They watched him mucking around the back of the boat, claiming he was breaking into his own home. Why? Why would you need to break into a cabin if your wife just drowned? Or was he trying to hide something before the police stepped foot on those 3-inch thick floorboards? The deeper we go into the anatomy of this boat, the more the accidental narrative begins to feel like a calculated lie. Brian Hooker told the world that his wife, Lynette, simply bounced off the back of their dinghy. It sounds like a freak accident, right? A tragic slip on a rubber tube. But we've done the forensic deep dive into the hardware, and the truth is much more rigid. This wasn't some flimsy inflatable toy. This was a Boss hard-hull dinghy. For those of you who don't spend your life on the water, let me explain. This is a pontoony, rigid vessel. It's not bouncy. It's built like a tank. You don't just hit a wave and spring off it like a trampoline. If Lynette went overboard, she didn't bounce. She would have hit that hard surface with the force of a car crash before sliding into the dark Caribbean water. And here is where the story gets chilling. Brian claims he was wearing a kill switch on his wrist, a safety tether that cuts the engine if the driver falls out. But ask yourself, why would a seasoned sailor wear a kill switch while his wife is sitting right next to him? You wear a kill switch when you're solo, so the boat doesn't leave you stranded. If they were together and she fell, the last thing you want is to kill the power. You need that engine running to turn around and save her. By wearing that switch, Brian was already acting like a man who was alone on that water. But it's not just the hardware that's screaming, it's the symbolism. On the bow of this boat, there's a doohickey, 2 dolphins, soldered onto the front like a grim hood ornament. It's an unusual, highly specific adornment. It's how we verified, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the boat we're looking at is the exact same Soulmate that became Lynette's floating prison. These dolphins were the last things Lynette saw every day she woke up on that water. They are silent witnesses to whatever happened in those final, desperate hours. Why does a hood ornament matter? Because it proves this boat was a customized, cherished home, not a rental, not a stranger's vessel. They knew every creak of these floorboards. They knew the electronics were tracking their every move. And yet, on the night she vanished, Brian's story is full of technical glitches. Think about the physical effort it takes to move a body on a boat. The Soulmate is a 46-foot fortress. To get from the dinghy to the deck, you're navigating high rails and heavy gear. Brian told rescuers he was marooned and had to be brought back to his own yacht. But when he finally stepped back onto the Soulmate, he didn't run below deck to look for his wife's things. He didn't collapse in grief. Instead, the fire and rescue teams watched him do something truly bizarre. He spent over a minute mucking around at the back of the boat, tampering with a specific hatch. He claimed he had to break into his own boat. But we know this boat has multiple access points. Why that hatch? Why then? It feels less like a man trying to get home and more like a man trying to retrieve something or hide something before the authorities could cross the threshold. Every time we look at the physical evidence, the accident gets smaller and the calculation gets bigger. The hard-hulled dinghy doesn't lie. The dolphins on the bow don't lie. And as we're about to see in the engine room, the very layout of this boat was designed to keep secrets buried deep. Now we're going into the belly of the beast. Most sailboats are a nightmare of cramped spaces and dark corners, but the Soulmate is different. It's an engineer's dream, or a killer's perfect workspace. This boat has a walk-in engine room. You don't have to crawl, you can stand, you can move. You can work with both hands free. The competitor's video treats this as a cool feature, but to me, it's a forensic red flag. Brian Hooker was a diesel mechanic. He knew every bolt, every wire, and every inch of that engine room. Rescuers saw him mucking around near a back hatch, removing a window air conditioning unit just to get inside. He told his friends, "I had to break into my own boat. But look at the layout. With a walk-in engine room and multiple access points through the aft head, why was he struggling with a window unit?" It's about the hide key. He claimed he was searching for a way in, but the fire and rescue guys didn't see a desperate husband. They saw a man focused on a specific piece of equipment for a full minute before he ever let anyone else inside. If you're a mechanic and you've spent 4 years customizing your boat to be a computer on the water, you don't struggle to get in unless you're making sure the stage is set first. And let's talk about the ghost chip theory. Brian claims the boat's connectivity just died. For 11 hours, the satellites couldn't find them. He blames power issues, but this engine room is pristine. The wiring is organized, clean, and professional. This isn't a boat that suffers from random, mumble-jumbled electrical failures. The solar power on this vessel is so sophisticated it doesn't even need shore power. It's self-sustaining. So, if the power went out at 9:30 p.m. and didn't come back until 8:30 a.m. the next day, it wasn't a glitch. Someone had to physically kill the heartbeat of this boat. When you have a walk-in engine room with easy access to every master switch, going dark is as simple as flipping a lever. While Lynette's daughter, Carly, was frantically searching the cabin for her mother's headscarves, the ones she wore in her final photos, she noticed things were missing. The blue Conch Republic scarf? Gone. The aqua bathing suit cover-up? Nowhere to be found. Brian says she bounced off the dinghy, but if she was dressed for a night out, why is her clothing missing from the guts of the boat? The engine room has access doors from the master suite and the guest bathrooms. It's a literal tunnel through the center of the ship. If something happened in that master cabin, the engine room wouldn't just be where you fix a motor, it's where you'd hide the truth. Brian knew that space better than anyone. He kept it clean, he kept it organized, and on the night Lynette disappeared, he kept it silent. We are looking at a man who had the tools, the mechanical genius, and the perfect layout to make sure no one, not even a satellite, could see what was happening behind those 3-inch thick whole walls. But there's one more place he couldn't fully scrub, and that's the plumbing. This is where the forensic trail leads us to the most uncomfortable realization of all. While we've been looking at the sky and the satellites, the real story might be sitting right under the floorboards. On the Soulmate, even the bathrooms, the heads, tell a story of a man who obsessed over control and eliminated waste. This boat was upgraded with nature's head composting toilets. The owner who sold it to the Hookers explicitly stated he hated blackwater tanks, those nasty, smelly sewage reservoirs most boats carry. Brian, the diesel mechanic, seemingly agreed. He wanted a clean, efficient system. But here is the forensic catch. A composting toilet doesn't just flush everything away into the ocean. It separates, it processes, and it holds. When Lynette's daughter, Carly, and her boyfriend Steve boarded the boat to gather Mom's precious belongings, they described the scene as frantic and a mess. They were looking for knickknacks and scarves, but did they look in the forward head? Did they check the aft head? Most people don't want to look into a toilet during a search, but in a forensic investigation, that is exactly where the biological truth hides. If there was a struggle, if there was a cleanup, if there was any DNA left behind, the very upgrades Brian loved so much would become the ultimate evidence traps. And then we have the final chilling piece of the puzzle, the 11-hour blackout. From 9:30 p.m. until 8:30 a.m., the Soulmate was a digital ghost. Brian says he was lost in the dinghy, but the boat stayed right there, anchored at Aunt Pat's Bay. Remember what the experts said, this boat is a forensic tracker. It logs every power surge, every engine start, every GPS ping. If Brian truly bounced her off the dinghy and then spent the night lost, why did the boat's main power system, the one fed by those top-tier solar panels, go offline at the exact same time? You don't lose satellite connectivity because of a cloud. You lose it because you don't want the forensic popcorn trail to show where you were or what you were doing on that deck. The fire and rescue team saw Brian mucking around with that window air conditioner trying to break in. But look at the evidence. He had the keys to the kingdom. He knew every doohickey and access door on that vessel. The truth is, Lynette Hooker didn't just vanish into the water. She was surrounded by 3-inch thick walls and high-tech sensors that should have saved her life. Instead, she was on a boat that had been turned into a ghost ship by the only person who knew how to flip the switches. Brian Hooker hasn't been charged, but as the data from this computer on steroids continues to be decrypted, the silence of the Soulmate is finally coming to an end. The ocean hides bodies, but it can't hide the data. And on the Soulmate, the data is screaming.